Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into the weeds, looking closely at the architecture of long-term recovery, specifically the 12 steps. We'll be weaving together neuroscience, psychology, and history.
That's right. We've got a mix of sources, the foundational stuff, like the big book, but also contemporary psychological takes and even brain science journals. The idea is to pull out the practical wisdom, what addiction really looks like, why these steps seem to work, and how this, well, unique fellowship came together back in the 30s and built something so adaptable.
And it kicks off with this fascinating paradox, doesn't it? We usually think control equals strength, but here recovery starts with acceptance, admitting you're powerless over something.
Yeah, on the surface, it sounds like giving up completely, defeat.
Exactly. But the sources, pretty much all of them, frame this surrender differently, not as weakness, but as an empowering first move.
You have to stop the losing battle against the addiction itself so you can finally start fighting for your life, for recovery. It's that acceptance that sort of clears the path.
Okay, let's start with the psychological setup. Addiction. We often picture the chaos, right? Life just spiraling.
That's the common image, sure. But the psychological analyses we looked at suggest something deeper. Often the chaos is preceded by this intense, almost obsessive need for rigid control that eventually just collapses.
So it's less about a lack of control and more about control being applied in the wrong way. Or maybe to the wrong things.
Precisely. It's misapplied control. Think about someone with this deep need to manage everything, emotions, situations, people. Life becomes, as one source put it, rigid, empty, and sterile. The addictive behavior itself, whether it's drinking or gambling or even overworking, starts as a twisted attempt to manage that internal pain or discomfort. But, inevitably it leads to the complete opposite, a total loss of control.
And the real trap, psychologically speaking, is maybe switching from one extreme obsession to another and thinking that's actual recovery.
That's a huge danger. Our sources map this out quite clearly. You've got the out-of-control side, the chaotic life, crisis after crisis, excess, that's your alcoholism, compulsive gambling, sex addiction, maybe even workaholism or compulsive spending, just messy.
Right, the more obvious manifestations.
And then the mirror image, the over-control behaviors. Life here looks totally different. It's risk-averse, maybe judgmental, feels empty, lots of deprivation.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like compulsive non-drinking or compulsive non-sexuality, anorexia, maybe extreme or rigid religious practices, even chronic procrastination or compulsive saving.
Wow, so outwardly opposite, but underneath.
Underneath, it's the same engine driving it.
Yeah.
That obsessive attempt to control the uncontrollable, either through frantic action or extreme avoidance. Real recovery means tackling that need for absolute control, not just changing the addiction's focus.
And this isn't just psychological, is it? There's a hard biological reality here that makes just stopping so difficult. We really need to get past seeing addiction as just a moral issue or weak willpower.
Oh, absolutely. The neuroscience is crucial here. We're talking about actual, measurable, chronic changes in the brain, particularly in the opioid and dopamine circuits.
Dopamine. That's the pleasure chemical, right?
That's the common misconception. It's more the chemical of wanting, of motivation, of salience. It tells your brain, pay attention, this is important for survival.
Okay, so how does a drug interfere with that?
It creates this massive artificial surge of dopamine, way beyond what natural rewards like food or, social connection can trigger. The midbrain, the primitive survival part, gets this overwhelming signal. This activity is critical for life.
Ah, so it flags the drug use as essential.
Exactly. And then, to make sure you repeat this essential behavior, the brain uses glutamate. Think of glutamate as the superglue that locks that drug memory, that association, into the brain's wiring.
So repeated use literally rewires the brain.
It does. It creates a neural reality of dependence. The survival system, that midbrain, effectively hijacks the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reason, judgment, long-term planning.
Which explains that internal battle. The rational mind knows it's destructive, but another part is screaming it's necessary for survival.
Precisely. The rational thought, I need to stop, this is destroying my career, gets drowned out by the midbrain yelling, you need this to survive, don't stop. That mental craving becomes incredibly powerful, often overriding everything else.
It's like a biological imperative gone wrong.
You could say that. Clinically, we often talk about addiction as a kind of learning disorder. It's learned, reinforced over time. And there's often a foundation laid early on.
Like early life stress.
Yeah. Studies link things like childhood stress, maternal depression, neglect, abuse, to changes in how the dopamine system develops, this can create a real biological vulnerability later in life. So it's learned, it's practiced, it changes the brain, and it fundamentally alters how someone deals with distress.
Okay, so if the brain's survival instinct is essentially compromised, if the rational self can't just win by force of will, where does the solution begin? How do the steps address that?
Well, the solution starts by recognizing that the head-on fight is futile. You have to stop that particular battle. That's really the core function of the first three steps. They tackle that crisis of control, that runaway ego.
Step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. It sounds simple, but based on the readings, it's way more than just saying the words, I'm an alcoholic.
Oh, much more. It's not passive. It's an active, investigative process. Admitting life is unmanageable means you have to really look at it, confront what the early writer Chuck C. called the uncomfortable truths.
How so? Like a personal audit.
Kind of. You systematically review different life areas, finances, relationships, work, health, your inner life, and you document how the substance or behavior created chaos. The big book suggests specific questions. Have I denied the problem? Has it crushed my self-esteem? Have I tried to manipulate others to fix things or cover up? It forces you past the denial, makes you see the scale of the wreckage. It establishes the problem is bigger than your individual will.
And there was an interesting point in some of the literature about how this step lands differently, maybe especially for women, admitting powerlessness as a way to gain power.
Yes, that's a really insightful perspective. For some women, accepting they can't control the drinking frees up immense personal energy. Instead of wasting power on that impossible fight, they can redirect it, asserting themselves, feeling their feelings, taking positive action in other parts of life. It's like a strategic surrender that enables a broader victory.
Okay, so once that powerlessness is truly admitted, step two follows. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. This sounds like the hope part.
It is. It's framed as this glorious release, freedom from the burden of having to solve this impossible problem entirely alone. The sources directly link that feeling of insanity and addiction to the ego, the mistaken belief that I have all the resources needed, even when all evidence points to the contrary.
But that phrase, power greater than ourselves, this is where people can get tripped up, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they're atheist or agnostic. How did the founders handle that potential conflict? Seems very faith-based.
That's where the practical wisdom, maybe even genius, of Bill Wilson and the early members comes in. They knew from experience that alcoholics, as a group, would not take pressure in any form, especially religious pressure.
Right.
So they deliberately broadened the concept. Step 2 uses power greater than ourselves, which is quite open. And then, crucially, in steps 3 and 11, they added the phrase, God as we understood him.
Ah, as we understood it. That's the key bit of phrasing.
It absolutely is. It blows the door wide open. It signals that this isn't about subscribing to a specific doctrine. It makes space for personal interpretation, for agnostics, for atheists to define that power in their own terms. Maybe it's the group itself, maybe it's the principles of the program, maybe it's nature, maybe it's something else entirely.
So belief isn't demanded up front, it's something that can develop.
Exactly. The only requirements are basically stopping the fight and being willing to try the program. Humility, an open mind, that's what allows this faith, this trust in something beyond the self, to grow. This pluralism was vital for the movement's survival and global reach.
Which leads directly into step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. It sounds like the action point, the commitment.
It's the turning point, the executive decision.
Yeah.
You shift from that default addictive state of trying to control everything to the recovery state of seeking faith in the process, faith in others, faith in that chosen higher power.
This tackles what the big book famously calls self-will run riot.
Right. And the insight there is that the alcoholic's strong will, that fierce determination, isn't actually the core problem. It's a powerful asset. It's just been tragically misdirected.
Towards controlling the uncontrollable, essentially.
Exactly. Trying to manage external events, other people's opinions, the flow of life. Step 3 is about redirecting that powerful will inward towards spiritual growth, towards following the program's guidance, towards helping others, rather than trying to micromanage the universe.
This whole acceptance, belief, surrender sequence, it feels very much embodied in the Serenity Prayer, which seems almost like a practical mantra for step 1.
It really does encapsulate it perfectly. The 3 parts line up. Serenity is the acceptance, stop fighting the past. Stop dreading the future. Accept the reality of change without making yourself suffer by clinging.
Okay.
Courage is the action part. The courage to change the things you can, which mainly means your own attitudes and actions, giving up the futile effort to control outcomes, making that honest appraisal of your real limitations.
And wisdom?
Wisdom is simply knowing the difference. It's that dawning recognition, often described as miraculous in the literature, that new possibilities open up only when you finally let go of the old, impossible ways of trying to control everything.
So once that foundation is laid, acceptance, belief, turning it over, the work shifts dramatically inward. This is where we get into the really challenging middle steps, starting with 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves.
Fearless is definitely the key word there. The aim is radical, unsparing honesty. The instructions are quite specific. Resolutely look for our own mistakes. And this is important to deliberately ignore, for the purpose of this inventory, what others did wrong. The focus has to be entirely internal, where we had been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened.
That sounds incredibly difficult, painful even.
It is. It's meant to be searching. It's designed to move the person out of that isolating state of toxic shame that fuels addiction towards building genuine self-worth, which can only stand on a foundation of truth, however uncomfortable.
How does someone actually do that, though? A searching and fearless inventory. It can't just be vague feelings of guilt. The sources suggest it's pretty structured.
Oh, it's very structured. Often it's broken down. First, there's usually resentment inventory. You list everyone, people, institutions, principles you resent. Then you detail what happened. And then the crucial part. You analyze how your side was affected, your self-esteem, your security, ambitions, relationships. The goal is to see your own part in it, often rooted in self-pity or feeling wronged, and shift focus from blaming others.
Okay, resentments first. What else?
Then typically a fear inventory, listing all the things you're afraid of, failure, criticism, financial insecurity, loneliness, whatever it is, and then tracing how those fears drove selfish or dishonest behavior. And sometimes inventories of conduct, especially around relationships. It's detailed work.
So the inventory digs up the material, but step 5 seems to be where the release happens. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Why is telling another person so critical? Why not just write it down and be done?
That act of verbalizing it, of sharing it with another human, is where the profound isolation of eviction really starts to break down. The sources are pretty unanimous on this. Step 5 is absolutely vital for long-term sobriety and achieving real peace of mind.
How does it provide that?
Several ways. It fosters humility. You can't maintain a false front while confessing your deepest flaws. It shatters the secrecy that gives past actions their power. And it creates this powerful feeling of connection, of belonging. You realize you're not uniquely awful, you're just human. The darkness loses its grip when exposed to light.
But who should that other human being be? Can it be just anyone, a friend, a family member?
No, the guidance is quite specific there. It needs to be someone trustworthy, someone who won't be personally affected or judgmental, and ideally someone who understands the recovery process. Usually a sponsor, a spiritual advisor, maybe a therapist familiar with the steps, or another experienced person in the program. Choosing the wrong person, someone who doesn't get it, can actually stall your progress significantly.
That makes sense. And you mentioned the power of step 5 is how it reframes the past.
Yes, this is huge. Those actions you feel immense shame about, the lies, the manipulation, the hurtful things done in active addiction, they stop being just evidence of you being a bad person. When confessed, when seen in the context of the illness, they're revealed for what they often were. Desperate, maybe pitiful, lonely attempts by a very sick person trying to cope or survive. It's a massive cognitive and emotional shift, a reset.
This self-knowledge, this clearinghouse, then sets the stage for steps 6 and 7, which are about readiness and asking for help with those defects.
Exactly. Step 6 is deceptively simple. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. The only requirement is readiness. Are you willing? Are you truly prepared to let go of those old patterns? This is where the addictive state of being willful, digging your heels in, shifts toward the recovery goal of letting go, just being willing to try a different way.
It sounds like a move away from that relentless perfectionism, the idea I have to fix myself completely, towards something more like accepting healing of brokenness.
That's a great way to put it, and it's important to clarify what defects of character or shortcomings actually mean in this context based on the literature.
Okay.
Feelings themselves, anger, fear, guilt, are not defects, they're just human emotions. The defect is the ingrained, stubborn refusal to acknowledge them, accept them, process them healthily, and let them go. It's the unhealthy reaction pattern, the destructive behavior that flows from that refusal. That's the target.
So it's about the response, not the feeling itself.
Right. Step 7 follows naturally. Humbly asked him God as we understood him to remove our shortcomings. It's the request for help, acknowledging you can't just willpower these deep patterns away on your own. The focus is on spiritual progress, which is realistic. The texts acknowledge some defects might linger, but most can be significantly toned down or eliminated through ongoing practice and spiritual growth.
All right, so after all that intense internal work inventory, confession, asking for help with character defects, the focus swings outward again, right? Towards repairing the damage done to others with steps 8 and 9.
Exactly. The process now moves into the relational sphere. Step 8 is, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
The willingness comes first, before the action.
Yes, the willingness is the crucial preparation in step 8. The actual making of amends is step 9. Step 8 is about facing the relational wreckage, really looking at who was hurt and how. It pulls the person away from the escapist tendencies of addiction and towards connectedness, towards taking responsibility.
And the harm could be anything, really.
Oh, absolutely. Lying, stealing, cheating, being financially irresponsible, breaking promises, emotional manipulation, verbal or even physical abuse, often things done to maintain the addiction or during withdrawal or intoxication. It's a comprehensive look at the impact on others.
That must be an incredibly difficult list to compile. Very humbling.
It is, no doubt, but it's also constructive. It provides a concrete map for moving forward, for cleaning up the past. The goal is acknowledgement and taking responsibility. But the real complexity, the real need for careful judgment, comes in step 9.
Which is, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. That exception is huge.
It's the ethical safeguard. It's the core principle guiding the how and when of making amends. It clearly states that your peace of mind, your need to clear your conscience, cannot come at the cost of harming someone else.
Can you give an example of how that plays out?
Sure. The classic example often cited is avoiding a sudden, detailed confession of past infidelities to a spouse if that confession is likely to cause immense trauma, destroy the relationship unnecessarily, or harm innocent third parties like children without serving any constructive purpose for the person being told.
So it's not about avoiding responsibility, but about avoiding causing new harm in the name of amends.
Precisely. The focus is on cleaning up your side of the street, healing relationships where possible, but not detonating bombs in other people's lives just to make yourself feel better. It requires serious thought, often consultation with a sponsor or advisor, good timing, and what the literature calls prudence, taking calculated risks, but always prioritizing not causing further injury.
Okay.
Yeah.
So having faced the past, cleaned up the wreckage as best as possible, the journey culminates in step 12. This describes the result, a spiritual awakening. What does that actually mean in this context? It sounds quite dramatic.
It's often described not as a single dramatic event, though it can be for some, but more as a profound shift in perspective, a new state of consciousness, a different way of experiencing life and relating to others. It's seen as a natural consequence, a kind of free gift that comes from sincerely working the previous 11 steps.
And the theme is joy of living.
That's often the theme associated with it, yes. And the key word is action. This awakening isn't passive, it demands expression. 2 main ways. First, by carrying the message to other alcoholics or addicts who are still suffering, sharing your experience, strength, and hope. Second, by actively practicing these principles in all our affairs, taking the honesty, humility, responsibility, tolerance learned through the steps, and applying them to everything: work, family, finances, everyday life.
So the focus shifts permanently from being trapped in self-suffering to actively witnessing our path for others.
Exactly. And that service aspect, carrying the message, isn't just altruism. It's considered essential for maintaining one's own sobriety and spiritual condition. It reinforces the lessons learned and fosters the unity of the fellowship.
It highlights that unique ability of the recovered person.
Right, to take their greatest weakness, their deepest sickness and defeat, and transform it into their most powerful asset for helping others who are facing the same battle. It's turning personal wreckage into a form of service.
To really grasp how these steps took hold and lasted, we need to touch on the history and the structure that allowed them to spread, right? This whole system didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, not at all. It grew out of a specific context, including a significant break from another movement that was active at the time, the Oxford Group.
Right, a Christian fellowship focused on moral inventory. AA started forming, where was it, Cleveland, in late 30s.
Around Clarence S. and his wife Dorothy, summer of 39 is often cited for Cleveland's start. But the critical separation from the Oxford Group happened because the early AA members realized the Oxford Group's approach just didn't work for alcoholics.
Why not? What was the clash?
Bill Wilson put it very bluntly. He said alcoholics fundamentally would not take pressure in any form. They couldn't handle the Oxford Group's sometimes aggressive evangelism, their specific religious requirements, or their method of team guidance, where a group would confront or guide a newcomer.
Too much authority, too directive for people already rebelling against everything.
Exactly. That ego, fresh off the chaos of addiction, bristled at being told what to believe or do. Bill W.'s famous quote really nails the difference in focus. The Oxford Group wanted to save the world, and I only wanted to save the drunks. They had to narrow it, simplify it, make it non-coercive.
And that non-coercive, simple approach flowed right into the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, when it came out in April 39.
It did. The book had very clear goals. First, write down the core spiritual ideas into those 12 steps anyone could follow. Second, provide a clear how-to guide. And third, crucially, include personal stories, those 30 case histories to show people, look, recovery is possible. Other people like you have done this. Identification was key.
In the name, the big book. There's a funny story there, right? It wasn't meant to be physically huge.
No, that was pure practicality, born from an argument about money. Early members were split on the price. Some wanted it super cheap, like $1, so everyone could afford it. Bill Wilson and others argued it needed to be priced higher, maybe $3.50, to generate desperately needed funds for the fellowship.
So how did they compromise?
To justify the higher price, to make people feel they were getting their money's worth, they decided to print it on the thickest, bulkiest paper they could find, literally making it a physically big book. And the nickname just stuck.
That's amazing. And the subtitle, you mentioned it earlier, reinforces that core philosophy of inclusivity. The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism.
Deliberately plural. It wasn't just Bill Wilson's story of a sudden white light experience. It explicitly made room for everyone else, for the slower, different paths to sobriety, acknowledging the diversity right from the start.
That structural wisdom didn't stop with the book. It's deeply embedded in the traditions, the guiding principles for the groups. Anonymity, for instance. It seems like more than just protecting privacy.
Oh, it's a profound principle with multiple layers. On one level, yes, it protects individuals. But more importantly, it protects the fellowship. It guards against the hazards of publicity, focusing on personalities. The founders wisely anticipated the danger. What if a prominent AA leader gets drunk? It could discredit the whole movement. Anonymity ensures principles come before personalities.
And it has a side effect on public relations too, doesn't it?
A brilliant one. When reporters cover AA, they realize they're dealing with an organization that wants absolutely no personal glory, no money, no prestige for its members. That inherent humility and lack of self-interest tends to turn reporters into allies. It generates consistently positive, helpful publicity focused on the message of recovery, not on individuals.
Fascinating. And this focus on the collective good is central to Tradition 1. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Unity is paramount.
It's called the most cherished quality. The survival of the individual depends on the survival and health of the group.
Yet, Tradition 4 seems almost contradictory. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. So, absolute unity, but also total local freedom. How does that work?
That tension is the genius. They knew they were dealing with, as they put it, a band of ego-driven individuals. Trying to impose rigid top-down control would have been disastrous. It would have fractured the fellowship instantly.
So they let the groups figure things out locally.
Exactly. Granting autonomy allows for local adaptation, experimentation, even chaos sometimes. Groups can run meetings their own way, try different things. But because major decisions still consider the impact on AA as a whole, the core unity is preserved. This decentralized structure, this liberty, is what has allowed AA to survive and thrive globally, adapting across cultures and time while keeping the core message intact. It's messy, but incredibly resilient.
So we've journeyed through the neurology of compulsion, the deep psychological work of the steps, and the, well, inspired structure of the fellowship itself. And that core paradox remains central. Finding strength by admitting limitation, moving from self-obsession to serving others.
And it's never really finished, is it? That idea from Chuck C about seeing the world through a new pair of glasses, he stressed it's an ongoing practice. It requires constant growth, maturing spiritually, continuing that emotional introspection. The freedom found isn't a one-time prize. It needs to be actively maintained by practicing the principles day by day.
The power of this whole thing seems to stem from that shared experience, people across the globe connecting through common suffering and a common path to recovery. The fellowship exists fundamentally to protect that shared experience and pass it on. And given that the principles are deliberately simple, inviting that joyous pluralism you mentioned, it leaves us with a pretty potent question for you, the listener, the learner.
Right. We've seen that AA's core strength lies in sticking to the simplicity of the steps in its literature, even while it expands globally through these autonomous groups. So the question becomes, what's the responsibility of the individual, the person who has benefited from this life-saving knowledge to help maintain that essential simplicity, while also supporting the necessary growth and evolution as the fellowship encounters new challenges and diverse experiences? How do you, personally, help preserve the core message while allowing the fellowship to expand its reach and understanding?
Something significant to reflect on as you integrate this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.